We actually found out who they were. Hollywood Arab terrorist, Sydney used car dealer, Italian pedophile priest, and New York Jewish dentist. Those are the four. How about Zawahiri? Now everybody knows bin Laden is a basket case. He's a dreamer, he's an eccentric, he doesn't know theology. Zawahiri seems to be an MI6 agent who knows plenty, and many would say that he is the brains of the operation. Typical, right? The dumb guy works for the US and the smart one works for MI6 and never fails. And of course, Zawahiri goes back to the desire, I think, of the Foreign Office and, well, others, many Israelis, sure, to get rid of Sadat, right? Because they didn't like this Camp David. And this operation here, the killing of Sadat, Zawahiri is part of the backup for that. He's an important part of it. But as I understand it, he was able to come to London and go back to Egypt, and, well, not to Egypt, but other places. So he seems to have a lot of protection. So I think he's an important patsy. And again, all of these people are mobilizable now today for Cheney's operations. Cheney went to Pakistan at the end of February. Cheney said to Musharraf, "You're going to attack Iran using your nuclear weapons." And Musharraf said, "No, I'm not." And the destabilization of Pakistan happened right after Cheney left. And what happened then? Old Zawad here declares war on Pakistan. It's unbelievable. Al-Qaeda attacks the enemies of the US, Russia through Chechnya, Serbia through Kosovo, Libya, and in this case now, Pakistan. Bin Laden. Well, they say Bin Laden wasn't getting enough dates. Right? The girls were, you know these ads they have in the US, right? They show the guy with the white hair and the green turn, he's in a bar, he's trying to pick up women, he doesn't get anywhere. And then he gets some hair dye and then he succeeds immediately. So Bin Laden, his social life was suffering because he was going gray. So now we have the latest Bin Laden, right before 9/11. Bin Laden is now sleek, and my counterintelligence work has allowed me to identify the new actor who's being used to personify Bin Laden. There it is. Revealed here for the first time. And of course, our dear friend. Now here's an interesting one. Sergeant Ali Mohammed was part also of the killing of Sadat, along with Zawahiri. He's a double agent, sorry about this, double agent for the US, and he's Bin Laden's body servant, his valet. And what does he do? When Bin Laden wants to go from Sudan to Afghanistan, he organizes the move. When Bin Laden says, "I need some targets in East Africa," Sergeant Ali Mohammed gets him. Who is he? He's a former major of the Egyptian army who has become a sergeant of the US Special Forces of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So the US Special Forces provide a body servant for Bin Laden. They also provide his travel agency, that's the State Department, his fan club, that's the CIA Bin Laden section, his law services come from Mrs. Albright, who protected him from being extradited from Sudan, and some other services too. Bin Laden could not exist without this kind of backup. In other words, patsies are high-maintenance, needy people. It takes a lot to keep them going. Now, a variation of the patsies. Suppose you have a bunch of patsies going. You can create a counter-gang or pseudo-gang. The main theoretician, and I really recommend him, Major Frank Kitson of the British Army, gangs and counter-gangs. He also calls them pseudo-gangs at different points. His other main work, low-intensity operations, subversion, insurgency, and peacekeeping. These are classics. They're read in the US Army all the time. There he is, Kitson. Now here's his problem. He's in Kenya in the early 1950s. The Mau Mau are a nationalist organization that's going to put an end to the colonial regime. What can he do? He says, well, I'll get some disgruntled former Mau Mau, and I'll create my own Mau Mau. And soon, terrible atrocities take place, caused by the other Mau Mau, by the pseudo Mau Mau. So in other words, if I have an important enemy, if I have an Arab nationalist, let's say, what I do is create my own pseudo-gang of Arab nationalists. I have them commit huge atrocities, and this scares the bourgeoisie It scares the middle class. It scares everybody to the point where they're against it. I hope that's clear. This is what he did in Kenya. The Mau Mau that you've heard of, the killer gangs, are actually the creation of, well, they're reported to be the creation of this operation that we just said. Most clearly, the so-called al-qaeda in Iraq. Without al-qaeda in Iraq, Bush would be in really bad shape. Because he's got to be able to argue that the war in Iraq is actually going against al-qaeda. And for that, he's got to have al-qaeda in Iraq. It means that al-qaeda in Iraq is a Kitsonian counter gang created by US, UK military intelligence. And there was that man of many faces. He was operating in the Ansar al-Islam enclave in Iraq before the war. US could have bombed him, never bombed him. They needed it, they wanted it. Let's do some moles. Now, Robert Cecil, I guess, is he a mole? Yeah, he's a mole in the sense that he's working in the government and he is loyal to a private agenda, his own. Richard Clarke, the anti-terror czar of the US, right, the one who should have been prevented 9/11, instead what he did was create the myth of 9/11. He came into the room in the beginning of the day, 9 o'clock a.m. in the White House, and started saying, bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden, al-qaeda, al-qaeda, al-qaeda. Based on what? Based on absolutely nothing. He said just, there are multiple attacks. They like multiple attacks. It must be bin Laden, al-qaeda, al-qaeda. He repeated this to his contacts at CBS News, CNN, and that is what then went around the world. This is the person who originated the 9/11 myth at 9 o'clock in the morning based on no evidence. Has he ever heard of other terrorist groups? Right? The Irish Republican Army, what do we know? Has he ever heard of deception? Has he ever heard of having an investigation? And there he is. He became the hero of the 9/11 bereaved families because of his histrionic ability. He had a meeting later in the day where he said, okay, we're going to have an interagency task force to find out who did it. We all know bin Laden did it, but now we have to go through the motions. Bush asked him, what do you think it is? Bin Laden, Mr. President. They like multiple attacks. That's the entire basis of the myth. There is no other basis for this myth. It has never been proven. They've never pinned any of those guys with any of the things that are supposedly that have gone on. Mayor Giuliani, sometimes known because of his authoritarianism, Giulianolini or Giuliani. Very important figure. He destroyed the crime scene. There was all this evidence lying around, and he said, we've got to get the stock market working again. Start scoop and dump operations. Of course, scoop meant you're going to scoop up many, many bodies, 400 firemen, policemen, emergency workers, all those office workers who died. And let's load the steel onto trucks and send it to Staten Island and destroy it. Destroy the evidence as fast as you can. Now, that's illegal. He's a lawyer. He knows that's a crime scene. You can't do that. That's a felony. Especially if it's a commercial airline crash in the US. It's a federal felony because you violated the National Transportation Safety Board. So here's Mr. 9/11. He also says he was given advance notice that the towers would collapse. How could anybody know the towers would collapse? The people in the South Tower, the one that came down first, were told, stay where you are. No sweat, no problem. Just have a cup of coffee and go back to work. He was told they were going to come down. How come he was told? And the poor guys and women in the office, poor guys were in the office and they were not told. The head of the Air Force, well, if you don't have any air defense between Boston and Washington, D.C. for almost 2 hours, 2 hours, Cold War standard would have been 10 or 15 minutes, because then the H-bombs would come down. Here's somebody who couldn't mount not a single fighter arrived in any useful position until about 2 hours were gone, from about 8:15 in the morning until about 10 minutes after 10.